The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Read by Alex Mabella. Chapter 52. Harry's House. Warning. This chapter discusses an attempted sexual assault. It was the most graceful sidelong apparition Hermione had ever executed, and all four travellers, living and dead, plus the puff, collapsed in a heap on Harry's doorstep. McNair rolled off the step and into some hydrangea bushes. Theo was pulling him out, and Hermione was straightening Regg's body when Harry opened the door.
"You gods, Hermione!"
he sputtered. He was thankfully dressed this time in black sweatpants and a Gryffindor Quidditch jersey. He bent to help Hermione with Regis.
"Why, this man's dead!"
"Do shout it a little louder, Harry. Your neighbours haven't heard you yet." Hermione snapped.
"Let us in!"
Harry grabbed Regis under the arms and dragged him into the house. Hermione followed, a discreet flick of her wand repairing her torn blouse and buttoning it up to her chin. Harry and Hermione took a sharp left into a small sitting room, trailed by Theo, who was holding the puff and dragging McNair. Hermione transfigured a crumpled napkin into a plastic tablecloth. "Here," she said to Theo as she spread the tablecloth on the carpet. "Put him on this."
"What's going on, Hermione?"
Harry asked, hovering by the door.
"Why are you back with a different wizard in a pile of bodies? And why is that one bleeding? He looks familiar." "Wald McNair,"
Theo said, dropping the Death Eater on the tablecloth with a thump. Harry's eyes widened.
"You're Theodore Not."
Theo nodded, and Harry looked at Hermione.
"Then you're done, Malfoy, already. Well done."
"No, I haven't done, Draco," Hermione snapped. Harry gave Theo the once-over.
"This one looks much more reasonable." "In so many ways," Theo said. Harry nodded. "And I assume you two can explain why you're at my house with a corpse and— Good Godric, where's that one's hand?" "Back at the Muggle hunting shack," Hermione said. "The what?"
"The Nuts had a shack in Wales where they hunted Muggles." Hermione sat kneeling beside McNair. She summoned Dittany and bandages from her back and began treating McNair's stump. Hermione had helped Harry paint and refurbish the sitting room, clearing out the dusty furnishings and adding a blue velvet sofa and chairs. It was a very nice oriental carpet. McNair couldn't be allowed to bleed all over everything. Harry was rubbing his hands through his black hair, making it stick up wildly.
"You need to stop hanging out with Slytherins."
Hermione stood.
"Harry."
She sat, tucking the Dittany bottle back into her bag. "That wizard there was Theo's uncle. He was trying to leave the Death Eaters."
"Regis,"
Harry breathed.
"Yes,"
Theo said, looking sadly at the body.
"Uncle Regis sent me now this afternoon."
Harry slapped hhis forehead.
"The nutcheck, of course, we should have known."
His eyes turned to Theo.
"So you've been there, not? Have you ever—"
"No," Theo snapped.
"I mean, yes, I've been there a few times, but I didn't know what it was used for until later."
Harry glared at Theo unconvinced, and Theo looked back at him steadily. Hermione was struck by how alike the two looked, with their green eyes, wild black hair, and long noses. They even had the same flat expression. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, sensing that Theo needed to prove himself to Harry on his own. Instead, she dropped onto the sofa, leaning back into the soft cushion with a sigh. She wanted nothing more than to curl up and go to sleep.
"Regis was the least cruel of my uncles,"
Theo was saying composedly.
"Sometimes he was even kind to me."
He swallowed.
"I had to try." "Did you have to drag Hermione into it? She ended up in a Muggle hunting."
"I made him," Hermione broke in. "I disarmed him and made him swear to take me." Harry turned his glare on her.
"That was fucking stupid thing to do, Hermione."
"Nonsense," she said. "If I hadn't gone with Theo, he would be in a Death Eater's hands, and now we have 2 captured Death Eaters."
"2?"
Harry asked, starting to look a little wild-eyed. Hermione's best friend was no stranger to sudden, bizarre situations, but this wasn't wartime. Hermione pointed. "The pygmy puff," she said. Harry stared at the tied-up purple fluff ball rolling on the carpet.
"That's a Death Eater."
"Celeste Rosier," Hermione said calmly. Harry turned pale.
"You turned Celeste Rosier into a pygmy puff?"
"Advanced transfiguration," Hermione said. She frowned at Celeste. "I didn't get the size right.
Or the eyes. I like the color, though. Harry looked from Hermione to Celeste and back to Hermione again. You learned how to turn vicious criminals into puffs? He asked. That's what they're testing in nudes these days? You'll have to add it to your porn, Hermione, said Theo. Stripped off his black cloak and took a chair near the sofa. Clearly they were going to be here a while. Hermione wondered if Harry would calm down enough to offer them tea. Apparently not. Harry had more questions. And how did that happen? Harry pointed to McNair's stump. Did you curse his hand off, not? Theo shook his head, looking a bit regretful. We don't know how that happened, Hermione said. I didn't have my wand. McNair was grabbing my... She trailed off, eyes suddenly wide. Harry looked ready to explode. Grabbing your what? My hair, she said, clasping her hand to her head. He grabbed my hair. She pulled a jeweled clasp out of her curls and held it up. Dark ringlets fell over her face, and she pushed them back impatiently. He grew very still in his chair, staring at the diamond clip in her hand. Are you telling me? Hermione nodded, letting her hand fall back to her lap. It's, protective. Theo groaned. I don't believe this. He held up a still bloody palm. Is that why my hand's all cut up, Hermione? You didn't think to warn me? His mouth turned down. That night outside Hogsmeade, when I cut my forehead. Hermione nodded, blushing. Theo brought a large fist down on the chair arm. Those fucking Malfoys! Is somebody going to tell me what's going on? Harry demanded, looming above them now, an intimidating figure despite the mustard stains on his Quidditch jersey. Harry's color was still high, and he had the look of a man determined to get to the bottom of everything. Hermione shifted uneasily on the sofa cushions. Draco gave me this hair clip, for my birthday. Malfoy gave you diamonds? Harry asked. She flushed again and nodded. And you're saying the hair clip took off McNair's hand? Hermione's flush deepened. No man can touch it except for Draco. Harry looked rather sick. The words did sound quite intimate when said aloud. No, just no. I can't believe that, Harry said. Ask Ron, Hermione said. He was caught too, and, Cormac. Just how many men were touching your hair this year? Demanded Harry, sounding like Draco. Wait. Harry looked at his own palm. The smug bastard. No, Harry, Hermione began. Don't. And so we all ended up with cuts. Harry spoke over her. But McNair lost his hand. Harry's eyes narrowed, and he joined Hermione on the sofa. Hermione, he said in a low, dangerous voice. What did McNair do? She couldn't say it. He couldn't get the words out, just looked pleadingly at Theo, then down at the carpet. McNair attacked her, Potter. She heard Theo say. He tried to rape her. There was a short silence. Look at me, Hermione, Harry said. She complied, looking up into his green eyes colder than Theo's ever could be. Tell me what happened. Everything. Hermione glanced at Theo, who nodded encouragingly, so she described their wait at the shack, Reg's arrival, the first flurry of curses, and Celeste's capture of Hermione and Theo's wands. Celeste tied Theo in ropes and taunted him, saying she'd use me to force him to cooperate, Hermione said. The crazy bat wanted to hunt Hermione, Theo said hoarsely, his hands clenching. Like an animal. Go on, Harry said, eyeing the puff which rolled helplessly beside McNair's still unconscious body. Hermione stiffened her spine. Anything was better than Harry dragging it out of her sentence by sentence. He slammed me against the wall. I made him drop his wand, but he had me by the throat, and I couldn't. I couldn't. Hermione took a deep breath. He tore my blouse, my skirt. Go on, Harry repeated softly. He pushed me on the bunk and I kicked him. That's when he grabbed my hand. He looked at Harry. McNair just started screaming. I turned over and he was rolling on the floor. It must have been the diamonds. Hermione held up the Gloriana clip again, and both Harry and Theo flinched back slightly.
Harry stared into her eyes a moment and apparently found reassurance because he nodded.
"All right," he said. "Put that damn thing away, will you? I'm going to hug you now, and I'd like to keep all my limbs."
Hermione put the clip in her bag, and Harry immediately pulled her close.
"You bloody moron,"
he said into her now white lady's hair.
"Are you sure you're all right?"
"Yes, Harry," she said. "I'm quite fine, really." Harry released her and glared at Theo.
"Your family has a lot to answer for, not?"
"I know," Theo said. The Slytherin sat stiffly, his fists on the armchair.
"I tried to keep her from going. You should have tried harder. Like you have, Potter."
Theo's voice was equally sharp.
"If half the stories are true, she's risked herself for you 100 times.
"Stop it, both of you," Hermione snapped. "We're wasting time. I'm fine," she repeated. "Thanks to Draco's diamonds."
"What was Malfoy doing, giving you those diamonds anyway?"
Harry asked with distaste.
"It's an interest gift,"
Theo drawled.
"What the hell is an interest gift?"
Theo's eyes flickered with some of his old mischief.
"The first step in the traditional betrothal process." "The what process?"
Harry jumped to his feet.
"That son of a—"
"Theo!" Hermione cried, also standing. She tugged at Harry's arm. "Harry, it is not an interest gift. Draco didn't mean it that way. Calm down."
"Come on now."
The old Theo was definitely back. He sat back in his chair, looking entirely at ease, while Harry fairly vibrated where he stood.
"You honestly think a wizard like Draco, raised in ancient traditions, would carelessly give away an obvious family heirloom, goblin made, and infused with protective magics?"
Hermione stamped her foot. "I am not marrying Draco!" Harry groaned and rubbed his forehead.
"So, guys, I'm still standing here with one dead, one wounded, and one very fluffy Death Eater in my sitting room."
He sounded like a man desperate to change the subject.
"Tell me the rest of it."
Hermione and Harry sat on the sofa again, and she continued her tale, describing her duel with Celeste, the Death Eater's transformation, and Reg's death. Harry's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his face was grim.
"You two were very lucky,"
he said, his voice cold.
"You could both be dead right now, after being raped and tortured, of course."
Hermione and Theo both dropped their gaze.
"I've seen the file on Celeste Rosier," Harry continued. "She worked behind the scenes with Ignatius Nott. She was obsessed with him. After he was wounded at the Department of Mysteries, she went on a number of Muggle-targeted rampages."
He looked at the puff, who was suddenly still.
"She's the only real brain outside Azkaban now."
"She is the leader, then," Hermione said. Harry nodded.
"Most likely. We need to get them both to talk."
He looked down at the Death Eater on the floor and frowned.
"Did the hair clip tear off his face too?"
he asked, as well he might. Vigner's head was covered in smeared blood. "I think I broke his nose when I kicked him," Hermione said. "Brownie scratched him too, and flew into Celeste's face when she tried to hex me again."
"Brownie?"
"The Death Eater's owl."
"You have a Death Eater owl?" Harry asked.
"It was Reg's owl, I think," Hermione said. "I named him." Harry was standing again.
"That's it. I'm taking this entire mess to the Ministry,"
he said with decision.
"I'll flow us all to Kingsley's office, where you two can give statements. We'll also send some Morris to the shack."
The man looked at Theo, who nodded reluctantly. "All right," she told Harry. "But keep in mind that Theo is submitting to questioning voluntarily, and he is not to take Veritaserum unless I am present."
"Now, Hermione," Theo began. "She's right," Harry said. "Don't take a drop of Veritaserum without her, not. Hell, I wouldn't take that potion without her."
Harry seemed calmer now that he'd made his decision and all the Death Eaters would soon be out of his house. He drew his wand and cast his stag Patronus.
"Kingsley Shackleboard,"
he intoned.
"Meet me at your office."
Stag bent its antler's head and bounded out the window. Theo stared after the glowing animal, amazed. Her best friend's action gave Hermione an idea, and she stood as well. A shining otter appeared. "Draco Malfoy," she said. "I am safe and unharmed. I will be back soon." The otter rolled head over tail and flew out of the room after the stag. Harry rolled his eyes, but said nothing, just dragged McNair's still unconscious body towards the fireplace.
"I'll open the ward so you all can enter Kingsley's office. Not bring your uncle, and Hermione, you take the puff."
gave the transfigured Celeste one last wide-eyed look, then tossed a handful of purple powder into the fireplace.
"Kingsley Shacklebolt's office,"
he shouted, and disappeared with McNair in a roar of green flame. Theo stepped closer to Hermione and took her hand.
"Listen, I just want to—"
"You don't have to."
"Hermione."
The green flames leaped into life, and Harry's head appeared.
"We don't have all day,"
he snapped and vanished. Theo looked irritated, but dropped Hermione's hand and pulled Regis to the fireplace.
"Kingsley Shacklebolt's office,"
he boomed, tossing flue powder into the flames. That left Hermione with the big pygmy puff, alone for the first time since she'd left the castle. She stared down at the Gloriana clip in her hand, wondering what would have happened without it. Face pressed into that mattress. She remembered something else as well, a tingling in her fingers. Something would have happened. If it hadn't been for the clip, she might have exploded the bunk, burned down the shack, maybe even hurt Theo. Focus! Hermione inserted the diamonds back into her curls and tucked the once again struggling Celeste under her arm. Then she stepped into the heatless emerald flame. She emerged from an ornate stone fireplace too large for Kingsley's small office. Glass windows looked out over the rest of the wide underground space, divided into numerous cubicles. You could hardly move with Harry and Theo there, plus McNair stuffed into a corner and Regis' body laid out by the floor. Green Flash and Kingsley stepped out of the fireplace wearing colourful dress robes. When not on duty, the dark, handsome wizard was a bit of a fashion plate. His eyes widened at the sight of his crowded office.
"Explain, Potter,"
Kingsley sat, looking narrowly at Theo. Clearly he judged the Slytherin most dangerous person present.
"Hermione and Theodore Knott left Hogwarts this afternoon to meet Regis Knott at the family hunting shack," Harry said crisply. "There they were ambushed by Celeste Rosier and Walden McNair. Regis Knott was killed in the fight, and Hermione defeated Celeste and McNair. She and Theodore brought all 3 Death Eaters to my hearth."
"Where is Celeste?" Kingsley asked. "Right here," Hermione said, pointing. She had placed the puff on Kingsley's chair, adding a sticking charm to keep the puff from bouncing around.
"Hermione turned Celeste Rosier into a pygmy puff,"
Harry continued with a faint smile.
"Celeste killed Regis, and Hermione wounded McNair."
Kingsley stared down at McNair, looking rather shocked at the Death Eater's grisly condition.
"You cut off his hand, Hermione."
"It was a defensive spell," Hermione muttered. Kingsley's gaze swept once more over all the dead, wounded, and transfigured Death Eaters, and he shook his head.
"Stay here,"
he snapped, and left the office, returning quickly with 2 on-duty auras.
"Take McNair and this puff to the holding cell and get a healer for McNair, and take Regis Knott's body to the examiner's office."
Theo sadly watched the auras depart with Regis, then turned back to see the head aura eyeing him with suspicion.
"Headmistress McGonagall assured me that you were unable to leave Hogwarts,"
Kingsley said to Theo.
"I'd be interested to know how you broke through the castle walls."
Theo just sneered.
"I have my ways."
"Oh, for Merlin's sake," Hermione said. "I helped Theo leave the castle, Kingsley." Kingsley didn't take his eyes off Theo.
"I suggest you cooperate, Mr. Knott."
"Lord Knott," Theo said, sounding bored. Hermione almost groaned. Arrogant entitlement was not going to work with Kingsley. "Regis Knott wanted to defect," she said. "He asked Theo for help and—"
"So Lord Knott here met with a known Death Eater in a Death Eater hideout without informing the Auror's office?"
Kingsley said.
"That is a serious crime and such—"
"Don't you dare try to arrest Theo for that," Hermione said, "unless you want to arrest me too."
"Hermione, be reasonable," Kingsley pleaded. "He's the son and nephew of convicted Death Eaters, travelling illegally to Death Eater hideout on family property. Knott came here voluntarily," put in Harry. "He didn't contact the Auror's office because he didn't trust us. We shouldn't prove him right." "How could you go with him, Hermione?" Kingsley asked. "You could have been captured, or worse."
"It's a good thing I did," Hermione insisted. "If I hadn't forced Theo to take me, and I had to put a wand to his throat, Kingsley, he'd be in the hands of Death Eaters. Theo was the target all along." Kingsley rubbed a hand over his head, suddenly looking drained.
"Let's start at the beginning."
He waved his wand and 2 straight-backed chairs appeared. Ted Aura bounced Celeste from his own chair and set out a quick quotes quill and parchment.
"I'll need statements from both of you."
Hermione and Theo took their seats and recited the events at the shack, being purposely vague about how they left the castle and omitting any mention of the portkey to Germany. Kingsley's face was impassive until Hermione mentioned McNair's attack on her, but her manner seemed to reassure him.
"We have counselors on call, Hermione."
Kingsley's deep voice was kind.
"If you need to."
"I'm fine, really," Hermione said for what felt like the umpteenth time. Kingsley sighed after she and Theo finished their story, then shook his head in disbelief.
"You both displayed a shocking lack of judgment," he said. "You could both be in the hands of Death Eaters right now. Celeste Rosier is merciless."
A look of pain touched his features.
"And technically you have both broken Ministry law. I can grant the two of you limited immunity as oral informants, but there may be a hearing."
He sighed.
"It depends on the information we get from McNair and Celeste Rosier."
Kingsley slid the parchment to Hermione and Theo.
"Each of you review the statement and sign it, and you're free to go. I'll send some Auras to the shack."
Edora glowered at Theo.
"And I advise you, Lord, not to leave Hogwarts grounds, for your own safety, if nothing else. You are released into Headmistress McGonagall's custody. And Hermione—"
Kingsley looked at her with concern.
"I won't try to limit your movements, but if you continue to consort with Death Eaters and relatives of—"
"You'll do what?" Hermione asked, jumping to her feet. "Don't you dare try to choose my friends. I consort with who I want, when I—"
"Hermione, please," Harry begged. "Let's not—" "Hermione, you're taking this all wrong," Kingsley said. "I just—"
"You have no right to threaten me or Theo," Hermione snapped, "considering just went out and did your job for you." Kingsley's face was flushed.
"Watch your tongue, Hermione."
"Watch my tongue?" Hermione's voice quickly hit its highest octave. "I'll say what I want, when I want. Get off me, Harry!" Theo was standing as well, giving Kingsley a rather reptilian stare.
"I hear you're running for Minister of Magic, Head or a shackleboard."
His voice was cold.
"One hopes you're capable of more tact than this."
Harry groaned.
"I take it back," he said. "This one is almost as bad. Kingsley, can they go now?" "Escort them personally back to Hogwarts, Harry, then return."
The Head Ora's face was full of affronted dignity.
"We have a long night ahead."
He began reading the signed statement, a clear dismissal. Harry hustled him over to the fireplace.
"Oh, of course, sir."
"I haven't finished, Harry. Kingsley can't just—"
"Honeydukes!"
Harry shouted, grabbing both Hermione and Theo and throwing the flue powder into the flames. The three of them fell out of the sweet shop's fireplace in a heap. Hermione immediately began wiggling out from under Theo, and he released her with a very Slytherin smile. Harry gave Theo a glowering look, then marched them over to the 3 broomsticks. There they picked up some meat pies and butterbeers for the hike back to the castle. Harry stuck with Hermione and Theo until they all emerged from the secret passage on the 3rd floor.
"Kingsley did you both a favour tonight,"
Harry told him.
"Could have booked you both. Yes, even you, Hermione."
"He should do us a favour," Hermione insisted. "He's got 2 Death Eaters in custody now, a feat, I might point out, his precious Aura office has thus far proved unable to achieve."
"You are spending too much time with Malfoy,"
Harry said. "Nonsense, I've always been like this," Hermione said, "except for the grammar." Harry's mouth quirked into a smile.
"You're right about that."
Gave her another hug, wary of the hairclip.
"I want to see you tomorrow morning."
"Yes, of course," she said.
10 o'clock, Harry said, "and don't bring either of them."
He disappeared inside the passageway. Hermione and Theo stood in the corridor, looking at each other awkwardly for a moment. Then Theo took her hand again.
"Hermione,
You have to warn the other Slytherins too, Theo," Hermione said. "The Death Eaters are obviously still recruiting, and students like Goyle and—"
Yes, now, Hermione."
"And don't tell anyone about the portkey. If Kingsley found out—"
"Hermione!"
Theo's voice was stern.
"You have to let me thank you. You risked your life for me and my uncle, and I can never repay you."
"It's all right," Hermione said, pulling her hand away.
"No, it's not."
Theo looked down at her soberly.
"I'm so sorry. In this very corridor I grabbed you and pushed you, and you were trying just to—"
He stopped and took a deep breath.
"You're just trying to help. If it hadn't been for you. Thank you."
"You can thank me by staying inside the castle," she said. Theo nodded.
"I feel lucky to be here."
"Good," Hermione said, turning and walking towards the staircase. Theo fell in step beside her. They stopped again on the landing. "Theo," she said, looking up at him, "if you hear from any Death Eaters—"
"I'll tell you right away, I promise,"
he said. Smile turned mischievous, and he raised his hand.
"Need me to swear on my ring?"
Hermione shook her head, suddenly feeling awkward again. "I'm sorry about your uncle." Theo's face fell.
"He chose to join them and stay so long."
He sighed.
"At least it was quick."
Hermione looked back at him sadly, wishing she knew what to say. You could hear students on the stairs back from dinner and chattering about Saturday night plans. "I have to go," she said.
"Hermione."
"I'm sorry, I can't stay," she said. "Good night, Theo. I'm so glad you're all right." She gave him one last concerned look, then shook her head and hurried up the stairs. Nobody stopped her, thank Merlin, on the way to Gryffindor Tower, and Hermione headed straight to the large bathroom in the girls' dormitory. Still felt cruelly from McNair's touch, not to mention the disembodied hand cuts. Summoning a few things from her room, she bathed and washed her hair, then donned her pink terry-cloth robe and fuzzy blue slippers, and padded back to her room. The sun was setting now, the bedroom suffused with red gold light from both the window and the fireplace crackling flame. Crookshanks jumped off her desk, complaining loudly. A gleaming broom was propped against the desk, and Hermione was unsurprised to see a long, familiar figure stretched out on the sofa, book in hand.
"Hello, Hermione,"
Draco said. To be continued. Next up, Draco is displeased. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon, read by LMX Marbella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.